The laughter hit me before the door even shut behind my back, sharp, high, and a little feral, like a flock of starlings that learned how to gossip. Not the warm, tipsy kind that belongs to birthday candles and half-remembered college stories. This was target practice. Someone was the punchline. Spoiler, it was me. My living room had been rearranged into a tribunal. 5 women in a neat little circle, wine glasses obediently sweating on coasters, notebooks splayed like hymnals at church. My wife, Rachel, front and center, held a sheet of lined paper with the kind of pride usually reserved for diplomas and birth certificates. She looked up just in time to see me take in the scene. "Oh, look, speak of the devil," said Tina, the one with a ponytail so tight it had to be causing honest theological doubts about free will. "Perfect timing," Rachel beamed, saccharine bright. "Honey, we're doing something fun." Fun. That's a word with many costumes. It wears a different dress when 5 women are seated in a circle with pens loaded like tranquilizer darts. "We're making a list," Melissa announced, notebook open and pen already dancing. "Guidelines to make marriages better. For husbands." Guidelines. Adorable. Like saying a subpoena is a friendly reminder. I set my keys in the dish, heard the clink like a little bell at a boxing ring. "A list, huh? What number are you on?" 18, Rachel said, practically glowing. She waggled the page like a prize. "Do you want to hear some?" The room was primed for a reaction. That's the game, right? You bait the bear, then film it for Instagram when it roars. I smiled, the kind that lies politely through its teeth, and pulled up a chair like I'd just been invited to poker night. "Please," I said, "read me your wisdom." Rule 1 arrived as if it had been waiting to be born all day. "All major decisions require wife approval," Rachel declared. "Career changes, large purchases, social commitments." "Define major," I asked. Sandra, the one in the stiff blazer, pursed her lips. "You know, major, of course," I said. "The dictionary will love that." They kept going. Rule 7 belonged to Diane, who looked like the type to alphabetize her fridge. Daily gratitude speech, 2 minutes. He thanks her for everything she does. I nodded. "Will there be a teleprompter, or is a hostage note fine?" A wave of tight little smiles. Sarcasm registered, humor not appreciated. Rule 11 came from Sandra again. "No hanging out with single friends. They're a bad influence. Freedom is contagious." "Tragic," I said. "We should probably mask for that." "And Rule 15, Chloe chimed in, arching her already dramatic eyebrows. "He dresses according to her preferences for social events. No more fashion independence." I looked down at my Henley and jeans. Dead simple. The uniform of a man who buys his shirts in packs of 3. "I'll burn my closet tonight and issue a public apology to my flannels." Then came Rule 16. Hobbies must include her or benefit the household. The circle hummed with approval. Nothing terrifies a committee like unsupervised joy. 18? I asked, as if inquiring after a rare cheese. "Weekly allowance tied to compliance," Melissa said briskly. "Good behavior rewarded, poor behavior penalized." "Like airline miles," I said, "except the flight is your own life." That was the first time someone looked away. "Enforcement?" I asked lightly. "It's nothing without enforcement." They brightened. Enforcement was their favorite toy. Withholding privileges, social pressure, financial consequences, public embarrassment. I waited for branding with a hot spoon, but they restrained themselves, probably to leave room for quarterly innovation. I watched Rachel drink their approval like a woman in a desert who just discovered a sprinkler. This wasn't the woman I married, the one who made up her own mind, then dealt with the fallout without a cheer squad. This one outsourced the thinking and contracted the righteousness. "Just to be sure I understand," I said. "Rules made by wives, enforced by wives, applied to husbands. Any rules for wives?" A pause. Melissa's pen squeaked against the page. We don't need rules. We're naturally relationship-focused. Right, I said. Like owls are naturally wise and cats are naturally honest taxpayers. Rachel's smile flickered. There's a tiny sound when a facade cracks. It's like the room learns how to exhale. Did you ask your husbands what might improve your marriages? I asked. Silence, the kind that rustles its skirt and pretends to be thinking. We base them on experience, Sandra said, which is usually code for, we took a vote in our own heads. Of course, I said, peer-reviewed in the journal of each other. They were annoyed now. I could feel the air harden. They hadn't invited a participant. They'd summoned an audience. Unfortunately, I'd brought opinions. Look, Rachel said in that tone people use when they've decided your objections are just your personality being difficult. If you'd listen with an open mind, we can present the full list. Think of it as an orientation for our new, improved marriage. Orientation, I repeated pleasantly. Like a theme park. Do we get wristbands? Is there a height requirement for respect? Snickering, then the look that says, he's being childish, so let's be the bigger people and ignore it. Pens poised, spine straight. The tribunal posture. I leaned back, hands folded. I appreciate the effort. 18 rules is ambitious. Before you walk me through them, I have a request. They all perked up finally, the docile animal learning a trick. Just one rule, I said. One I'd like to add. For balance. Rachel glanced at Tina. Tina glanced at Sandra. Sandra glanced at Chloe. Chloe glanced at Diane. A circular chain of permission. They don't make decisions. They pass them around until the edges get smooth. Fine, Rachel said. One rule. Then we go through ours. I stood slowly. You don't hurry this part. You let the floorboards learn your weight again. I walked a short, deliberate line between their circle and the coffee table. The paper in Rachel's hand shook just enough to make the shadows twitch. 18 is thorough, I said. It shows dedication. My rule is simpler. It's not even a paragraph. It's a sentence, an axiom, something you can embroider on a pillow if you're feeling brave. Melissa flipped a fresh page. The pen hovered like a scalpel. I let a beat pass, then another. The room learned the shape of the silence and sat very still inside it. Here it is, I said. Any woman who participates in making rules to control her husband automatically consents to the same rules being made for her. The laughter didn't die, it fell off a cliff. Rachel's smile slid off her face like a sticker losing its grip. Chloe blinked. Sandra's pen made a small, apologetic dot on the page. Tina stared at me as if I'd just suggested a new climate where gravity sometimes works and sometimes prefers not to. What? Rachel started, then stopped, because the word what had nowhere safe to go. It means, I said gently, that the door you opened swings both ways. If unilateral control is the new gospel, then congratulations. You've all found religion, and the sermon applies to you too. That's not the same, Sandra said reflexively. People always say that when it is. Isn't it? I asked. You've argued husbands are improved by oversight. I'm simply honoring your premise. People who believe in remodeling spouses without their consent probably need supervision themselves, for fairness. Melissa set her pen down like you set down a hot pan you thought was cool. We were brainstorming. I looked at the sheets, the numbered items, the tidy bullet points, the enforcement plans underlined twice. Brainstorming, I echoed. Hurricanes are also weather events. Diane swallowed. You wouldn't actually... Actually what? I said. Apply your logic to you? Ask your husbands what they think? Bring a little sunlight into the lab? The room's temperature shifted 3 degrees cooler. It's funny how quickly certainty learns to shiver. I'm happy to listen to all 18, I said, and my voice was suddenly calm in a way that made everyone else's pulse do the jumping for them. But from this moment forward, we're in a world where the maker of the leash wears one too. If you don't like the chafe, maybe you don't like the invention. No one laughed. The tribunal had misplaced its humor, possibly underneath the couch with the lost remotes and courage. "Shall we proceed?" I asked, smiling with my teeth and not my eyes. No one answered, but I didn't need an answer. I had the room, I had the silence, and I had their rulebook balanced in Rachel's trembling hand like a promise nobody wanted anymore. Melissa, ever the secretary of this suburban cult, clutched her pen like it was the staff of Moses about to part a sea of common sense. "That's not fair," she muttered. Her knuckles whitened. "We were only trying to—" "To what?" I cut in. "Run a science experiment? Control your husband? A beginner's guide? Don't undersell yourselves, Melissa. That notebook in your lap isn't doodles and shopping lists. It's a constitution, if dictatorships issued them in glitter ink." Rachel shifted uncomfortably, but she tried to salvage the momentum. "Honey, you're overreacting. We're not actually going to enforce—" "Funny," I said, "because 10 minutes ago Sandra here was explaining enforcement mechanisms with the zeal of a prison warden. Withholding privileges, public shaming, financial penalties. That's not a game. That's a business plan for tyranny." Sandra flushed. "We didn't mean it literally." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Just like bank robbers don't literally mean it when they write the note. It's more of a creative expression." Tina leaned forward, ponytail sharp enough to cut glass. She smirked, trying to recover the alpha energy she thought she had. "You're making this dramatic. We're just brainstorming ways to keep husbands accountable." "Accountable," I echoed. Lovely word. Almost sounds noble until you realize it's a leash disguised as jewelry. Rachel bristled. "We just want structure." "Structure?" I barked a laugh. "Rachel, you sound like you're pitching me a new office cubicle system. This is a marriage, not IKEA." The women fidgeted, their wine suddenly too warm, their pens suddenly too heavy. For a group that had been cackling like hyenas over my supposed shortcomings, they were astonishingly fragile under the bare bulb of logic. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, voice dropping lower, calmer, deadlier. "Let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't a comedy sketch. You had 18 rules. Numbered, detailed, with punishments, with implementation strategies. Melissa, you even underlined community enforcement. Don't insult me with 'we were joking.' Nobody writes 3 pages of organized dictatorship for laughs." The silence pressed in. Diane, the one who'd been so excited about her daily gratitude speeches, tried for levity. "Okay, fine. Maybe we got a little carried away." "Carried away?" I snapped. "Rachel just announced that if I fail a weekly performance review, she'll revoke privileges. What am I, her 12-year-old grounded for forgetting to mow the lawn?" Rachel's face flinched, as if the mirror had finally shown her the clown makeup she'd been wearing. But before guilt could bloom, Chloe piped up, arching her brows like she was auditioning for Villain of the Week. "Don't you think you're being a bit defensive? If you have nothing to hide, why are you so threatened by some simple rules?" "Oh, Chloe," I sighed, "you're mistaking resistance for guilt. But I get it. You're used to lecturing your husband until he pretends to agree just to get you to stop talking. That won't work here." Her mouth snapped shut like a mousetrap. I let the pause linger, then casually pulled my phone from my pocket. I didn't even unlock it, just set it on my knee, screen down. The reaction was volcanic. Melissa stiffened, Tina's smirk evaporated. Sandra muttered, "Oh God." Chloe's perfect brows furrowed, and Diane nearly spilled her wine. Rachel's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "Me?" I asked innocently, tapping the phone with one finger. "Just wondering how much Dave would enjoy hearing about Rule 13. You know, the one about mandatory chores. Or maybe Ethan would like to learn his wife thinks he needs financial supervision." I let my gaze settle on Sandra. I bet his face would be priceless. "Don't!" Melissa blurted, loud and sharp. "You can't involve them." "Why not?" I asked sweetly. "You just spent 20 minutes talking about involving wives from the community. Social pressure, remember? If husbands are to be policed, surely they deserve to know the bylaws." Rachel lunged forward, panic flaring. Please don't do this. It'll ruin everything. Ruin what, Rachel? I asked, leaning back, phone twirling between my fingers like a coin. This little utopia of female supremacy? Or your marriage, which you apparently thought was so boring it needed a performance review? Her lip trembled. Tina opened her mouth, then shut it, words failing for once. Chloe turned pale under her contour. Sandra rubbed her temples like a woman at a meeting gone terribly wrong. Diane whispered, "He'll never let me go out again if he finds out." I pounced. "Let you?" I repeated, voice slicing. Interesting choice of words, Diane. Sounds like you already know what boundaries look like. You just prefer them one way. The room was suffocating now, heavy with fear and backpedaling. Perfect. Exactly where I wanted them. I picked up Melissa's notebook, flipped a page, and read aloud. Weekly performance review, grade A through F. Failures result in revocation of privileges for 7 days. I slammed it shut. Tell me again how this was all just venting. Not one of them spoke. Their eyes flicked nervously to Rachel, who sat frozen, queen of a collapsing empire. I placed the notebook gently back on the coffee table, then stood. Ladies, I said evenly, you wanted rules. You wanted accountability. Congratulations, you're about to get both. Only not in the way you imagined. Rachel whispered, "Honey, please." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had the floor, and I intended to use it. I stood over them like a teacher about to hand back exams everyone knew they had failed. The notebook sat there, fat with arrogance, pages trembling slightly from Melissa's sweaty fingerprints. "Do you know what fascinates me most?" I asked softly, pacing around their little circle. "The hypocrisy. When you hold the leash, it's empowerment. When I so much as touch my phone, it's tyranny. When you write a system of punishments, it's clever. When I read it out loud, it's suddenly cruel." No one answered. Silence, apparently, was the only rule they were willing to follow without a grading rubric. I plucked the notebook from the table. Its pages were covered in Rachel's neat handwriting, plus Melissa's bullet points, Tina's underlines, Sandra's smug little stars in the margins, Chloe's doodled exclamation marks, Diane's color-coded highlighter stripes, a collaborative masterpiece of pettiness. I tore out the first page. Reap! The sound ricocheted around the room. All 5 women flinched like I'd fired a gun. "Rule 1, I said, letting the page flutter to the floor. "Wife approval for all major decisions. Gone." I tore out another. "Reap. Rule 2 through 5, joint custody of my spine. Gone." Rachel's mascara shimmered in her eyes, trembling at the brink. "Please stop." "Stop?" I asked, voice hard. Funny, that word wasn't in your list. I read enforcement, punishment, privilege revocation. I don't recall a single clause about mercy. Another page, another rip. The floor was littered with shredded decrees, scraps of authoritarianism carpeting my living room like confetti from the world's worst parade. Sandra tried to stand. "This is pointless. We're leaving." I barked a laugh. "Leaving? You're welcome to walk out, but don't pretend this never happened. These scraps aren't going back in the notebook, Sandra. You can't tape your arrogance together again." She sat back down. Her blazer suddenly looked like a straitjacket. I dropped the half-empty notebook back on the table, its spine cracked, its authority gutted. Then I leaned on the chair, knuckles pressed white. "Respect," I said evenly. "Respect isn't a rule you legislate like zoning laws. It isn't something you can bullet point into existence. It's earned. And you, every one of you, decided to spend your evening destroying it." Chloe sniffled, her perfect eyebrows quivering. Diane's hand shook so badly she had to set down her wineglass before it shattered. Tina, usually the loudest in the room, chewed her lip like a child caught with a stolen toy. Melissa stared at the floor, wishing it would swallow her whole. And Rachel, my wife, my supposed partner, looked at me with eyes swollen and wet, the fire gone, the queen dethroned. You want to know the difference between men and women when it comes to conflict? I asked, pacing again. When women get upset, they form committees. They write lists. They build support groups to validate their feelings. When men get upset, I paused, letting the silence carve its own gravestone. We just leave. That line landed like a guillotine. Every face snapped to me, panic breaking across them like waves against a seawall. Rachel's lips trembled. You don't mean that. I turned toward the door, fishing my keys from the dish. The same keys that had clinked when I walked into this circus. Oh, I mean every syllable. I slipped on my jacket, calm and slow, letting the weight of inevitability sink in. You wanted rules? Here's mine. I don't live in a house where my dignity is negotiable. Melissa's voice cracked. Please don't tell the husbands. I don't need to, I said, cold as winter steel. Because I'm not staying here to play house under your supervision manual. Rachel lurched forward, grabbing my arm, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Please, honey, don't do this. Don't leave. I was wrong. I just wanted to fit in. Fit in? I cut her off, yanking my arm free. You humiliated your husband, drafted my life into a cage, and called it empowerment. That's not fitting in, Rachel. That's betrayal dressed in group therapy. I opened the door. Cool night air spilled in, honest and sharp. I looked back once, 5 women frozen on the couch like schoolgirls caught shoplifting. My wife standing in the wreckage of her little empire, eyes red, hands empty. I'm leaving for a week, I said flatly. You have 7 days to decide if you want to be my partner or their disciple. When I come back, I'll have my answer. If you choose them, congratulations. You'll have plenty of girls' nights, but you won't have a marriage. And with that, I shut the door. The sound was final. A judge's gavel on their foolish little courtroom. The car engine roared to life. In the rearview mirror, my house sat quiet, lights blazing, filled with women choking on the smoke of their own fire. I drove into the night. A week can feel like a month when the air in your house has turned toxic. For me, the 7 days away were clean, crisp, simple. I stayed at a friend's cabin just outside town. Silence, firewood, and my own company. No tribunals, no notebooks, no smug laughter echoing off the drywall. For Rachel, I imagine the same 7 days felt like a prison sentence served in her own skin. When I pulled back into our driveway, the house looked smaller. Not physically, same beige siding, same shutters, but diminished, like it knew it had been caught hosting treason. Rachel was waiting at the door. No circle of conspirators this time, no notebook, just her. She looked thinner, not physically but in spirit, like 7 days had hollowed out her arrogance and left her raw. Mascara-free, hair tied back, sweatshirt instead of armor. Hi, she said, small, like the word had been rationed. I stepped inside, the familiar smell of home mixed with the faint sting of Lysol. The floor was spotless, no confetti of shredded pages, no evidence of the Constitution that had briefly declared me an inmate in my own house. She closed the door behind me. I was wrong, she blurted before I could even put down my bag. I've spent this week thinking about every word you said, about how stupid I was, how cruel. I thought I was being clever, funny even, but I wasn't. I was humiliating you, my husband, and I hate myself for it. I studied her, not the words, but the eyes, the same eyes that had sparkled when she giggled at Rule 11. They were red-rimmed now, but steady. You wanted to impress them, I said flatly, to fit in. So you turned me into the punchline of your comedy routine. Tears welled. I know. And it was pathetic. I wanted their approval so badly I forgot the only approval that matters is yours. I forgot this marriage is supposed to be equal. I let them convince me that control equals strength. But it doesn't. It's weakness. Mine. For once, no excuses, no deflection, just naked admission. I set down my keys and crossed my arms. So what now, Rachel? Another notebook? Another brainstorming session with Melissa and her highlighter army? Her head shook violently. Number, they're gone. I told them not to come here again. I even deleted the group chat. I'm done with them if it means even the slightest risk of losing you. Her voice cracked on the last word. I let the silence stretch long enough to make sure she understood this wasn't theater anymore. I told you before I left. I don't live in a house where my dignity is negotiable. That rule still stands. I know, she whispered. I'll spend as long as it takes, proving to you that I respect you, that I'm your partner, not your warden. Please, give me the chance. For the first time in 8 days, I let out a breath that wasn't laced with bitterness. I stepped closer, close enough to see the way her shoulders trembled, close enough to smell the salt of her tears. Here's the deal, I said evenly. We move forward only if you understand this. Marriage is partnership, not management, not performance reviews, not allowances. If I ever feel you slip back into that mindset, Rachel, if you even joke about putting me on probation, you won't see me pack a bag for a week. You'll see me pack it for good. She nodded quickly, like a student desperate to pass a final exam. I understand, I promise. No more rules. No more stupid games. Just us. Equals. I studied her one last time, searching for even a flicker of insincerity. None. Just a woman who had flown too close to the sun of her friend's approval and gotten scorched. Finally, I set my bag down by the stairs. Good, I said, because I didn't marry a committee. I married you, remember that. Her tears spilled, but this time they were mixed with relief. She stepped forward cautiously, like approaching a wounded animal, and when I didn't step back, she wrapped her arms around me and sobbed into my chest. For the first time since that cursed night, I let my arms close around her. Not because the pain was erased, it wasn't, but because the first brick in rebuilding had been laid. In the quiet, I thought back to my own words. When men get upset, we just leave. It was true. But sometimes, just sometimes, if the woman waiting at the door has truly learned her lesson, we come back. Rachel had 7 days to think. Now it was my turn to watch if she could live the lesson. It's funny. Rachel still shudders if she even sees a notebook lying around the house. Melissa tried texting her once after that night. Rachel left her on read. Tina waved from across the grocery store aisle. Rachel turned her card around. Chloe, Sandra, Diane, ghosts. As for me, I didn't need revenge, not really. Watching their smug little empire collapse in 30 minutes flat was plenty. Sometimes the best punishment is letting people sit alone with the echo of their own stupidity. And Rachel, she's different now, careful, respectful, not out of fear, but because she finally learned what partnership actually means. Maybe losing me for a week taught her more than any performance review ever could. There are no more rules in this house, no lists, no privilege revocations. Just two people, one marriage, and the understanding that dignity isn't up for negotiation. And if she ever forgets, well, I still have Melissa's old notebook. Torn to hell, yes, but taped back together just enough to remind her how quickly laughter can die when respect leaves the room. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.